My fiancé left me for my best friend. So I went on a journey to redefine my life. I'm sitting on the edge of our half-made bed when she says it, fingers wrapped around the handle of a suitcase we bought together, like that detail matters at all. Her voice is too calm for the sentences she's saying, and my brain keeps snagging on stupid things. The chipped polish on her thumbnail, the way her hair is still damp from the shower, the faint smell of the laundry detergent we both hate but keep buying out of habit. I'm moving in with him, Maya says, and that him is my best friend, the one whose name sits in my phone with a stupid little star emoji because that made sense once. My mouth tastes metallic, like I've bitten my tongue without noticing. You're not serious, I manage, even though the packed suitcase, the box of her shoes by the door, and the folded stack of shirts on her side of the bed all scream that she is. I grab for something, anything, and come up with, we're supposed to be tasting wedding cake on Saturday, because that's where my brain was 30 minutes ago. Arguing with myself about whether lemon would be too polarizing. She squeezes the handle tighter, knuckles whitening. I can't marry you, she says, and there's a tremor in there now. I love you, but I'm in love with him. The sentence feels like someone has reached into my chest and rearranged my organs without anesthetic. I hear myself laugh, sharp and wrong. Somewhere in the living room, my phone buzzes with a notification. For a second, I have the absurd thought that it's him, following up on a meme he sent earlier. The tiny normalness of that making everything else tilt. We'd been together for 4.5 years when that suitcase showed up in our bedroom. I'd known Maya for 5. We met at a work friend's housewarming party where I'd only known the host and she'd only known the host's cat. She was standing in the kitchen, struggling to open a jar of olives, swearing under her breath. I took it from her, popped it open with that satisfying soft crack, and she looked at me with this relieved grin like I'd just defused a bomb. Stronger stranger, thank you, she said. We ended up talking for hours on the tiny balcony while other people drifted in and out, sharing stories about awful landlords and favorite childhood snacks. When she left, she squeezed my arm and said, "We should hang out sometime." Like it was both an invitation and a dare. My best friend Noah had been around way longer. We grew up down the street from each other, 2 awkward kids sharing Game Boys and bicycle crashes and the knowledge that both our parents fought too loudly. We went to different high schools but still spent most weekends together, doing nothing in particular. He was the one who drove me to my first date with a girl, sitting in the car outside the bar and giving me a pep talk that mostly consisted of, don't throw up, and remember that you're allowed to leave if she's weird. When I told him I liked women, he shrugged and said, "Cool, more guys for me then." And that was that. When I introduced him to Maya a couple of months into our relationship, I was nervous in that stupid way where you want 2 people you love to like each other, but also not too much. They got along really well. They liked the same podcasts, the same terrible action movies, the same dumb puns. At first, it made me happy. The 3 of us would go for brunch or beers or hike badly marked trails and get lost together. I joked that they were both my emotional support golden retrievers. Looking back now, it's like watching the red flags rise in slow motion and knowing exactly how the parade ends. The first time I felt that little knot in my stomach, we were all at a bar. Some dim place with sticky floors and a live band that wasn't quite good enough to justify the cover charge. I went to the bathroom, came back, and found them leaning in close, laughing at something on his phone. Nothing inappropriate. No hands where they shouldn't be. But there was a bubble around them I suddenly wasn't included in. When they saw me, they shifted, opened the circle, smiled. It was small. I told myself I was being weird. Then came the inside jokes. Remember the thing with the seagull? Maya would say, and they'd both crack up, leaving me to piece together the story from fragments. The texts in our shared group chat went from balance to mostly them, with me popping in like a guest star on my own show. When Noah's long-term relationship imploded, he leaned hard on both of us. We took turns staying up with him on the phone, dragging him out of bed, making sure he ate. It felt good to be there for him, to repay all the times he'd picked me up off the floor. I don't know when exactly the line blurred between supporting him and building some parallel emotional world I wasn't fully part of. What I do remember clearly is the night we got engaged. We were on a weekend trip to the coast, staying in a cheap Airbnb that smelled like bleach and old guests. We took a walk on the beach at sunset because we're not as original as we like to think. I was rambling about something, maybe work, maybe the tide. When Maya stopped, turned to me, and dropped to one knee with a ring box she'd clearly been carrying for hours, my brain went white noise. She said words about loving me, about wanting to keep choosing each other, about how I was home, and I said yes with the kind of giddy certainty I'd only ever felt once before, when I quit a job I hated and drove away with all my things in the back of my car. We kissed. People on the beach clapped, and my cheeks hurt from smiling. That night we FaceTimed Noah. He answered on the second ring, hair a mess, shirt inside out. "Dude," he yelled when we held up my hand to show the ring. "Finally. I thought I was going to have to propose for you." He offered to help with wedding planning. "Call me your best man adjacent," he said, and we laughed and said, "Of course you will." When we started looking at venues, he'd come along to tour them, making stupid comments about acoustics and where to put the photo booth. When we were overwhelmed by the choices linen colors, chair styles, a truly absurd number of cake flavors, he'd send spreadsheets. "I live to serve," he'd text with a gif of some TV butler bowing. If someone had told me then that I should be wary, that boundaries were fuzzing, I would have rolled my eyes. He was my best friend. She was my fiancée. We were all adults who loved each other in different ways. I trusted them. Maybe that's the part that hurts the most, more than anything that came after. I trusted them. The first real crack came 3 months before the wedding. We'd gone to check out a florist, the three of us. On the drive back, I fell asleep in the back seat, lulled by the hum of the highway and the warm, late afternoon sun. I woke to the sound of my name. Don't know how to say it to her. Maya was saying. "She'll freak out," Noah replied. "Maybe wait until after the wedding planning stress dies down." "Feels unfair," she said, like I'm lying by omission. My heart jackhammered. I kept my breathing slow, eyes half closed. "You were kind of lying," Noah said after a beat. "But, like, with good intentions?" They laughed. It sounded strained. "What are you lying to me about?" I asked, sitting up. They both jumped like I'd fired a gun. "Shit, Em, you scared me," Noah said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Maya's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "We're just talking about the budget stuff," she said. "You just said you were lying to me," I replied. Noah did his peacemaker voice. "It's not a big deal," he said. "Drop it, yeah?" I wanted to push. I wanted to demand every detail. Instead, some ugly fear of being too much kicked in. I made a joke about eloping to avoid all the stress. They both laughed, the atmosphere unfreezing a little. The moment slid by, filed away with all the other tiny dissonances I was refusing to look at too closely. There were signs. Of course there were. Nights when she'd come home from grabbing a drink with colleagues and mention oh so casually that Noah had been there too. The way she stopped leaving her phone face up on the coffee table, started taking it with her to the bathroom. The time I walked into the living room and found them sitting closer than people do when there's an entire couch available, pulling apart fast like teenagers. I confronted her once, 2 months before the suitcase. "Do you have feelings for him?" I asked, words tumbling out before I could rehearse them. She'd been loading the dishwasher. She froze, plate in midair. "What? You heard me." My throat was tight, but the words came anyway. "You two are weird lately. And I don't know if I'm going crazy or if something is actually happening." She slammed the plate down harder than necessary. "He's my friend," she said. "Our friend. He's going through a hard time. I'm allowed to care." "That's not an answer." Her shoulders sagged. "I'm tired, Em," she said. "Tired of having everything I do analyzed. Nothing is happening. Please stop making drama where there isn't any." I backed down. I hate that I did. But I did. I told myself I was insecure, that this was old abandonment stuff from my childhood, that I should trust the people I loved. And then, several weeks later, there was the suitcase. In the days after she left, my world shrank to the size of our apartment. People talk about heartbreak like it's this poetic thing, dramatic crying in the rain, impulsive haircuts, angry karaoke. The reality was quieter and more pathetic. Dishes piled up in the sink. I slept in stuttering snatches at weird hours, often fully clothed on the couch. I put her hoodie on once, then ripped it off so fast the zipper scratched my chin because it still smelled like her shampoo. Noah didn't show up at my door, and some treacherous part of me resented him for that, even as the rest of me never wanted to see his face again. He texted, buffeted between minimizing and guilt. "We didn't mean for it to happen." One message read. Another said, "Maybe one day you'll understand." I blocked him, then unblocked him, then blocked him again. Maya's messages were longer, apologizing in paragraphs, saying she'd always love me, explaining that she'd been confused for a long time, that this wasn't my fault, that I was an incredible person who deserved someone who could give me everything. I couldn't read them without feeling physically ill. People took sides, as they do. Some friends rallied, bringing food, sending memes, sitting with me while I alternated between crying and numbness. Others went quiet, like being close to my grief might be contagious. My parents tried. My mom made too much soup and kept asking if there was anything she could do. My dad offered to help me move if I decided I couldn't stand living in that apartment. It was my therapist who said the thing that actually lodged in my brain. I'd gone back to her in the middle of all this, half out of desperation, half because I needed a place where I wasn't worried about making anyone else uncomfortable. I sat in her office, staring at the tissue box on the table between us, and said, "She broke my life." "Did she?" Dr. Patel asked, tilting her head. "Or did she break the version of your life that depended on those two people doing what you thought they'd do?" "You say that like there's a difference," I snapped, then felt immediately bad. "There's a huge difference," she said calmly. "One is about your entire existence being shattered. The other is about a structure you built, with their input, collapsing. Painful. Devastating. But not the end of you." I hated her for being right. The phrase stuck with me, though. Not the end of you. It rattled around in my head when I stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m., when I walked through the supermarket aisles trying to remember how to shop for one person again, when I caught myself reaching for my phone to text Maya a funny comment and had to reroute that impulse into nothing. About a month after she left, the landlord emailed about renewing the lease. Something about the bland language, "Please indicate your intention to extend or vacate," made something in me snap into focus. This apartment was ours. Our couch, our plates, the dent in the hallway where we'd dropped that IKEA bookshelf. The idea of staying, of sleeping every night in the room where she'd told me she couldn't marry me, made my bones hurt. I called my dad and took him up on his offer. Finding a new place on one income wasn't glamorous. I ended up in a slightly shabby one-bedroom above a laundromat. The walls were thin. The pipes clanged. The carpet was a questionable shade of brown. But when I put my box of mugs in the cupboard, it was my cupboard. No ghost toothbrush in the bathroom cup. No mail with 2 names on it in the letterbox. While we were moving, my dad paused, leaning on a box. "You know," he said, "you could come back home for a while, save some money. Your room's still there." I looked at him, at the little lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when I was a teenager, and thought about the person I'd been in that room. Angry, closeted, convinced no one would ever really see me. "I think I need to figure out who I am when I'm not living in a place that used to be somebody else's idea of my life," I said. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough," he said. Moving didn't magically fix anything. I still woke up with that hollow ache, like my ribs had been rearranged. But having a space that was mine, even if it was tiny and smelled faintly of detergent from downstairs, gave me room to experiment with being a person separate from Emma and Maya, or Emma who has known Noah since she was 8. Redefining my life didn't happen in some grand eat, pray, love montage. It happened in stupid small ways. I rearranged the furniture 3 times before it felt right. I bought myself a plant and cried when I realized I was scared of killing something else. I signed up for a pottery class because my therapist suggested I do something with my hands that wasn't scrolling or baking. I made lopsided bowls that looked like they'd been through an earthquake, and the instructor said, "Nice character." And I laughed for the first time in what felt like weeks. I reevaluated my friendships too. There were people I'd always thought of as wedding guests who turned out to be actual friends. My coworker Leah, who I'd never hung out with outside of office drinks, texted me one Friday. "Want to get dumplings and talk about anything but men and wedding venues?" We ended up sitting in a tiny, noisy restaurant for 3 hours, ranting about everything from work politics to bad reality TV. She became a regular fixture in my life. Someone who knew the worst of it and showed up anyway. On the flip side, there were people I'd considered close who ghosted after the initial "that sucks" message. One mutual friend of mine and Noah's tried to stay neutral in a way that felt like death by 1,000 cuts. "They didn't mean to hurt you," she said once over coffee. "Feelings are messy." That was the last time we met up. My feelings were messy too. Somehow that didn't seem to carry the same weight. Work, weirdly, became both a refuge and a mirror. I'm a speech therapist, which means my days are spent coaxing words out of people whose mouths or brains have betrayed them. There was something humbling about sitting with clients whose lives had been upended by strokes, accidents, unlucky genetics, and realizing that while my pain was real, it wasn't the only kind in the room. It didn't make my heartbreak smaller, it just recontextualized it. A few months into my new life above the laundromat, my supervisor offered me the chance to run a small group program instead of just doing one-on-one sessions. "You're good with groups," she said. "You notice dynamics." I almost laughed at the irony of that. Noticing dynamics had not exactly been my strength in my own life. But I said yes. The group was 4 adults with aphasia, each at different stages of reclaiming language after strokes. Our sessions were chaotic and slow and full of frustration and triumph. Watching them relearn how to say their own names, how to ask for what they needed, how to tell a joke again, did something to my brain. These were people building new selves on top of old ones, with all the grief and stubbornness that entailed. It felt familiar. I started running, badly at first. I downloaded a Couch to 5K app and wheezed my way around the block, my lungs protesting, my knees questioning my life choices. I wasn't chasing some revenge body. I just needed to feel like my body could do something other than curl up around its own hurt. Some mornings when the sky was that soft pre-dawn blue and the air tasted clean, I'd feel, for a few glorious minutes, like I was inhabiting myself fully instead of dragging my consciousness around like a reluctant suitcase. About a year after the breakup, I took a solo trip. Nothing huge. No quitting my job and backpacking across continents. Just a week in a coastal town I'd always wanted to visit but never had, because it didn't fit into other people's schedules. I booked a cheap Airbnb, packed a small bag, and told my boss I'd see her in 7 days. Traveling alone was strange in ways I hadn't anticipated. No one to split dessert with. No one to debate over whether to go to the museum or the beach. It was both lonely and liberating. I ate when I was hungry, not when someone else was. I walked until my feet hurt and then sat on a bench watching waves, not worrying about whether my companion was bored. On the 3rd day, I took a surfing lesson. I am not an inherently athletic person. I swallowed half the ocean and got tumbled by waves big enough to demonetize a travel vlog. But every time I managed to get onto my knees, then my feet, for even a second, there was this surge of triumph. The instructor, a sunburnt woman who looked like she'd been carved from driftwood and coconut oil, clapped when I rode a tiny wave all the way in on my stomach. "You're better than you think you are," she said, grinning. She meant surfing. My brain took it wider. I wish I could tell you that during that trip I had some cinematic moment of clarity, standing on a cliff at sunset, realizing I was whole and healed. Truth. I cried in the shower one night because I saw a couple on the beach earlier, arguing about sunscreen in the way that Maya and I used to. I wrote a long, unsent letter to both her and Noah, listing all the things I wished I'd said when it happened. I also ate the best fish tacos of my life and read 3 books and went to bed whenever I felt like it. Growth and grief tangled up. Somewhere around the 18-month mark, the sharpness of the betrayal dulled. Not because what they did hurt any less, but because the space they took up in my head had been slowly filled with other things. My clients, my running, my weird little pottery bowls, my new friendships. I could go whole days without thinking about them, then catch myself and feel both proud and guilty, like I was cheating on my own pain. Then, one afternoon, I ran into them. I was in the city, heading to a professional development workshop, brain full of logistics and parking fees, when I saw them across the street. They were standing outside a cafe, mid-conversation. For a second time did that stretchy thing it does in movies. Maya's hair was shorter. Noah had grown a beard that didn't quite suit him. They looked older and exactly the same. My heart rocketed into my throat. I considered ducking into the nearest doorway. Before I could, Maya looked up and saw me. Our eyes met. The color drained from her face, then flooded back in blotches. She said something to Noah, who turned, froze. We did the awkward sidewalk dance people do when they kind of want to run, but their feet aren't cooperating. "Hey," Maya said finally, like we'd bumped into each other at the supermarket, not in the aftermath of our exploded lives. "Hi," I said. My voice sounded weirdly normal. "How are you?" Noah asked, hands stuffed in his pockets. There were 100 answers to that question, ranging from still picking shrapnel out of my ribs to Better than you'd probably like. Instead, I said, I'm okay, busy. You? They both talked at once, then stopped, then laughed. They looked like a couple in the ways couples do. Body language angled toward each other, a certain unconscious mirroring. That hurt in a distant, echoing way. After a few minutes of small talk about nothing work, the weather, the construction down the street, Maya said, I heard you moved. And started running? I saw a photo on Instagram. You look good. There was a time when that comment would have lit up every insecurity. Now it landed differently. Thanks, I said. I started doing a group at work, too. For clients. It's fulfilling, she nodded. I always knew you'd be good at that, she said. There it was. The little thread of validation from a person whose opinions had once been the scaffolding of my self-esteem. I felt the tug, then felt myself not moving. I should go, I said, glancing at my watch even though I had time. I've got a workshop. Emma, Noah said, and his voice had that same cracking quality it did when we were teenagers, and he'd take the blame for things I'd done. I'm sorry. Maya swallowed. Me too. I know that doesn't fix anything. I just wanted you to know. For a long, surreal moment, I stood there, holding 3 versions of myself in my head at once. The girl who shared her crisps with him on the playground, the woman who said yes on a beach, and the person who now lived above a laundromat and could run 5 kilometers without dying. I know, I said. And I did. We'd all been young and stupid and selfish. They'd hurt me in ways they probably still didn't fully grasp. I'd built them into the pillars of my identity, then blamed them when the whole structure collapsed. All of that could be true at the same time. Take care of yourselves, I added, surprising myself. Seriously, as I walked away, my hands were shaking. I ducked into a side street, leaned against a wall, and let myself feel it all, the old pain, the residual anger, the weird, tentative compassion. Then I took a deep breath, pushed off the wall, and kept walking. Redefining my life didn't mean erasing them or pretending what happened didn't matter. It meant allowing this current version of me to exist without being permanently welded to their choices. I'm still figuring it out. Some days I feel strong and certain. Other days I see a wedding photo on social media and have to mute everything for a while. But here's what I know now, in a way I didn't when my fiancé was standing in our bedroom with a suitcase. My life is not something that can be broken beyond repair by 2 people deciding they want a different storyline. They detonated the version of it that revolved around them. In the rubble, I found parts of myself I hadn't made room for: my own ambitions, my own boundaries, my own weird hobbies and quiet mornings. My fiancé left me for my best friend, and for a long time, that sentence felt like the whole story. Now it's just the opening line of 1 chapter. The rest is still being written by me in my slightly shabby apartment that smells like detergent and coffee and clay. It's messy and unspectacular and deeply mine. And for the first time in a long time, mine feels like enough.